You've never seen it?
I've never seen it.
Oh, my.
So Colin, the world that we live in, you know, it's like it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, whether we want it to or not, right? There's no time really to appreciate an era as it's coming by, or as it is happening or ending, really.
Yeah.
Movies, I think, allow us to take a fucking point in time and print it, and you know, not only just print it, but like print our memories of it.
Okay.
And that is a really like big thing for me in movies that I love to see, is like an artistic representation of like someone watching everything come to an end. In any case, I've kind of themed this next year's movies around the end of an era.
Okay.
And the end of an era can kind of mean a lot of different things, right? Movies depicting the end of an era in real life, though often through a distorted mirror, or like that feels less than real or more real than real sort of thing.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to my mind is like Cabaret.
Yeah.
Cabaret, like depicting the end of the fucking, or the beginning of the Nazi regime, and therefore the end of like peace and civility in Germany and in the world.
And you don't realize it's happening, as you said, while it's going on. It's only in hindsight that you can recognize.
Yeah. Movies can depict the end of an era in the end of a life, whose richness can often capture the absurdity or beautiful of a changing world in real time. The director that I like to think about in that sense is Don Hertzfeldt.
Yeah.
He makes all these like animated things. You've seen one. You took me to one.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I took you to one. I hadn't seen it either. It was Me, his one that was released last year.
yeah, and that was before It's a Beautiful Day, which is one of my
Yeah.
favorite fucking movies of all time. Movies can capture the last days of a man, either in a literal sense or in a more spiritual or emotional, like collapse of humanity, like man, just in general. The thing I like to think about is like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Like humans aren't all gone in that movie, but it's very clearly depicting just the end of humanity as we know it. Movies can also capture the last moments in culture before a huge traumatic event, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I'm coming at with this sort of thing. And that being said, Colin, is there any other movie that you can think of just off the top of your head, like end of an era sort of thing?
Saturday Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever.
That's my favorite film of all time. Brought that up 90,000 times on this show.
And we will fucking continue to, as long as it's relevant.
Until John Travolta wins his posthumous, that means he's dead. Until John Travolta gets his recognition for his performance in that movie, and Norman Wexler gets the recognition for his writing in that film, I'm going to forever to continue to bring it up in the modern day. That movie captures sort of like the end of like childhood, I think, super well. You know, it's sort of the end of his teenage years. He's going out and doing, air quotes, you know, adult things, but the film is all kind of centered around this idea of like, stuff is coming to an end. He needs to grow the fuck up. Yeah. He needs to learn that maybe the people he's hanging around aren't the best, and maybe he needs to find like a new influence. And then Staying Alive, of course, builds on those themes and is a great sequel and an amazing film. Yeah. And nothing went wrong, ever. Nothing bad ever happens in the film Staying Alive.
God. Today's film covers one of the last culturally relevant debutante ball seasons in New York, focusing on a small group of teenagers who hold parties after these big balls called Deb parties.
Okay.
Where they talk about philosophy, they talk about like the literary arts, and your average like teenage drama masked in a layer of the preppy culture. Whit Stillman is the director for today. Have you seen any Whit Stillman pictures, by the way?
No, name does not ring a bell.
Okay, cool. He's the writer, director, producer of his first film. He had previously worked as like a junior editor for a political magazine, and he had a middling successful like illustration company. So he was inspired by like small budget films that were coming out at this time, roughly in like the 1980s, when he started planning to make this film, specifically like Stranger Than Paradise by Jim Jarmusch and Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It.
Yeah.
Small, independently fun films that like receive great success.
Yeah.
In spite of like their middle budget. You know what I mean? In direct contrast to last episode's film, instead of starting very, very early in his life, Whit Stillman actually started pretty much in the middle of his life. He started shooting the film at age 37 on his own savings with like no formal training or experience as a director specifically.
Yeah.
He would go on to sell his apartment for $50,000. He'd borrow money from friends, from family, and like past business associates, and film the film and complete it in like basically chunks, ostensibly. So he'd have, once he ran out of money, he'd like edit together, or once he was like running out of money, he'd edit together a chunk and show like, hey, this is what I'm doing, here's what I have, can you guys please help me fund this sort of thing. Small cast of very small name actors. For many of them, this was their first feature film, and for some, it would appear to be their only. We have Cecil Taylor Nicholas. He's like Whit Stillman alumni, basically. He's in most of his films. And he also had a bit of a career outside of that in like a ton of movies, like Jurassic Park 3. He's on TV a little bit, like CSI, Grey's Anatomy. Chris Eichman, similar background. He's in all of the movies that Stillman released in the 1990s. Also won Best Screenplay for Turn of the River from the Hamptons International Film Festival, so he moved on to have some success.
Yeah.
But then you have people like Edward Clements, who stars as our main protagonist, Tom Townsend, and apparently just fell off the face of the earth after this, because I can't find anything else about him. Yeah. If anybody knows him, maybe shoot something in the comments. But
I mean, that's super common for like actors whose like first and only role is in like an indie film. You know, movie, stupid fucking shirt that I'm wearing, Clerks. It's like the actor who plays Randall. He got into like, I believe, one indie film after this. I think he directed something, but for the most part, his career has only been working with Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, you know, dudes like what you're talking about, they're not really actors. They're just, will you be in my movie?
No.
I want to make something you fit for my movie. Most people who end up in my shorts, I hired my first actor for Sad Clown. It's not that like uncommon of a thing, I would say.
Yeah. I already asked you, like, Colin, do you know anything about Whit Stillman? It's pretty good that you know nothing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pass you today's film. Listen, I'm gonna be real. This is leftover wrapping paper from my mom's birthday. Hi, Mom.
Bag of film bootleg bullshit. I mean, here's the thing with this. I thought it was one movie, but the way you're describing it doesn't really sound like it. So I literally no clue.
What were you thinking it was?
I don't remember what the title is. That's my point. It's just like...
Okay.
Oh, we got a hipster cover here. Metropolitan.
Yes.
1990. Cool. I have no context or clue, but that is fine.
Yeah, Metropolitan. First thing that this man ever fucking released.
Oh my God! Score by Mark Zuzo.
I have a feeling you're not gonna know. I was hoping. I put down a couple of these names because I swear to God I've heard Chris Eichman before, but I've never like heard.
I'm sure, but I don't have any like context connecting to it. So no idea.
No, so you don't know. Director, don't know. That's wonderful. That's great.
I don't know who these Roald Dahl ass looking people are. So
yeah, as I said, this takes place in New York. It's the end of the debutante season. We're just gonna like jump right on into it, I think.
Okay, cool.
Without any further delay, let's take a walk out into the cold December streets of New York City. This is Metropolitan.
Get fucked, nerd.
See y'all in a minute. Yeah, see you in a minute.
Tom is the only guy I've ever liked in my whole life. I'm not going to forget about him because of some apparent inconsistencies.
I've had a crush on Serena with some ups and downs for over 2 years.
Serena had an incredible number of boyfriends, at least 20.
Rick finds Monica and Serena Slocum still together. Well, one thing's for certain. She's lost her virginity by now.
How can you say that?
You're right. Maybe she wasn't a virgin.
Is it true you're a baron?
As a matter of fact, it is. I don't take that sort of thing seriously, though.
Rick von Slonaker is tall, rich, good-looking, stupid, dishonest, conceited. In short, highly attractive to women.
I don't see how that can be bad.
I shouldn't have to go into all the sordid details.
Well, could you go into a few sort of details?
They're doomed.
What are you talking about?
Downward social mobility?
They're bourgeois.
Shut. Playing strip poker with an exhibitionist somehow takes the challenge away.
And in love.
I mean, for them, men are either dates, potential dates, or date substitutes. Well, I find that dehumanizing.
They're all so very Metropolitan.
I guess you could say it's extremely vulgar. I like it a lot.
All right, Colin. So, you want to start us off with a quick plot synopsis of the movie Metropolitan?
So the white bread is on aisle 4.
It is not on aisle 4. It is on aisle 11. Thank you.
Okay. Like most people who consume exclusively white bread, you think your experience is the only valid one, so...
Hey, I dabble in sourdough.
I'm only going to tell you this once. Shut up.
The plot, if you can call it that, and once again, I'm not saying this is an insult to the film or anything. Metropolitan is a group of yuppies. Coincide and meet every week to discuss meaningless things that don't matter because they're not just children, but they're rich, privileged children that think they understand things.
What it shows is that a kind of belief is innate in all of us. At some point, most of us lose that, after which it can only be regained by a conscious act of faith.
You've experienced that?
No, I haven't. I hope to someday.
I would call this like an approximation of a hangout movie, but it doesn't exactly fit that because hangout movies often have like a vibe. A vibe doesn't have like a constricted asshole going through most of it. And I repeat once again, this is not a critique at all towards the movie as like a negative thing. That is very clearly, from my perspective, what the film's goal is.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I very least to me, I don't think I'm ever supposed to like most of these people. I think I'm supposed to like a couple of them. I'm not sure I do.
But the context of the novel and nearly everything Jane Austen wrote is near ridiculous from today's perspective.
Has it ever occurred to you that today, looked at from Jane Austen's perspective, would look even worse?
I think there's a level of you're supposed to sympathize with some of these characters, which I think they accomplish.
I think there should be a definite difference between the phrase sympathize and empathize.
Yeah, I'm probably mixing that up. Empathize in the sense of like understanding where someone is coming from, and sympathize in the sense of like feeling for someone, I guess.
Yeah, because like, you know, if we're going into like, I don't know, I guess what I thought the movie's plot was going to be towards the beginning and something a bit more straightforward. I really thought we were going to sort of have a story of a young man who is just starting to like enter the real world through the eyes of a child who himself is lower class, and he's trying to like fit himself into this higher class thing. But then as the film goes on, that's very much not at all what the film is about. And that kind of setup scene, it serves a very different purpose. I enjoyed this a lot. I think where I would kind of put this movie into is what I consider to be a modern cable movie. Now, no one has cable anymore, right?
Yeah.
But there were two channels I grew up watching movies on a lot, which was TNT, which is where you'd watch dad movies. You know, like sort of 90s courtroom dramas and stuff like that. And TCM. And TCM very much exists. And where cable movies exist now for me mainly is the TCM section on Max. Yes. Max feels like, I've told you this before, like a cozy cable network, but you have more control over what you're watching, and you're not really burdened with commercials or anything like that. I think this movie is like a really solid 3.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Once again, it's not me like shitting on it or anything.
3.5's a passing grade.
Yeah,
like
no.
that's fair. That's passing.
No.
That's good.
No, it's just it's like one of those movies where I would watch it, enjoy it, not think about it for probably years, and then someone would bring it up and be like, yeah, no, I remember enjoying that.
The way Whit Stillman was working at the time, he wanted to make a movie called Barcelona, and it required traveling abroad. It required a much larger budget.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, here are these movies coming out that have much smaller budgets that then afford these up and coming directors to go out and do bigger things.
Yes, this is sort of like what would result in the 90s new wave sort of happening, where you would have a bunch of indie directors coming out of their shells, and Miramax would oftentimes come in, buy up the rights to these tiny little movies, like Clerks, as you brought up, she's got to have it, and all these tiny little movies, and make these people able to make something that doesn't necessarily have like a massive budget, but they are allowed to go from like no budget movies to mid-budget movies.
And it's one of those things where it's like, you know, he made this, he wrote this over the course of like the 1980s based upon some of his experiences just growing up and living in, I think, just like sort of that culture. He kind of occupies a bit of Tom Townsend's like role, I think, is where he's coming from a lot, where he's not quite as rich as everybody else around him, and would not necessarily find as much success as people around him in the expected format, you know what I mean? And I think really interestingly, they talk to this man, this much older preppy in the bar towards the end of the movie, and I think that represents his like present like view on the whole thing.
It's the director having an analog to state the themes for the movie loud and clear if the audience wasn't getting it.
Of backgrounds, but some of them where you're going to have to accept that people from our background are not doomed to failure.
I wonder if they were typical ups.
I think can scream as a little bit of first-time director insecurity, maybe. I think that scene isn't necessary.
I think it's really necessary.
No, I think
so.
the movie speaks for itself on its own, and you're just kind of having something there to explain what the movie has already been saying with its own scenes. I think the next 10 minutes kind of painted.
That is true.
Yeah.
But I do like the. I do just like this conversation, basically, with oneself. Like, you know, what could you have told yourself as a kid to, like, maybe steer yourself in a different direction? Like, oh, we're not doomed. I'm doing fine. I have all this going on for myself, but it all just feels so mediocre. You know, it's like what you would tell yourself as a fucking kid.
Yeah, and I guess that really does kind of get down to, like, something I find interesting about Tom that you brought up, that I think I don't know if I disagree as much or if I just have a different viewpoint on it. I never got the vibe that Tom at one point was any less rich than these other kids, but I get the vibe that his wealth was taken away with his divorce with his father.
Yeah.
Because that money clearly still exists because he's living right across the street from the apartment that they go to have these little after parties every week, which is very clearly why any of these like guys actually get involved with the debutante shit, because all of them just kind of want to get laid and talk to any of these girls and treat them like objects and try and ignore anything that any of them are saying.
Yeah, and it's a systemic thing too, the debutante ball. I mean, it drags on from the literal 1800s, where this would be the place that families would bring their young daughters to find suitors, and they would find people and hopefully get relationships started, because they weren't really expected to find relationships outside of like the strict fucking purview of what their parents can control.
And for the women, as much as it is still very much a thing of they're privileged, and I do not feel bad for any of these kids. The guys are not victims in this at all. All the men in this movie, I want to punch straight in the fucking face.
Of who like of these three like main characters, who is it? Fucking Nick, Tom, and Charlie. Who's the first to get punched?
I mean, here's the thing. If you're talking like a situation where I'm not a violent person, I would not punch any of these people, especially because
but
they're
the urge,
children.
of course.
So like obviously it's like Nick and Charlie are two sort of sides of this really loud, obnoxious, both bravado and weak-willed incel culture that annoys the shit out of me. I don't like Tom the most.
You don't like Tom? Oh, you don't. You mean?
I dislike Tom the most.
Oh, okay.
And once again, that is not me calling him a bad character, because I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
I think Tom is really weak-willed about stuff that's important, but then is very obsessive and compulsive, like a lot of teenagers, with stuff that ultimately like does not matter.
What's wrong with a novel having a virtuous heroine?
His point is that the novel's premise, that there's something immoral in a group of young people putting on a play, is simply absurd.
You found Fanny Price unlikable?
She sounds pretty unbearable, but I haven't read the book.
He represents a person whose name I'm going to say here being redacted, but I am going to come up with some sort of fake name afterwards.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'm going to call him Bartholomew.
Okay.
So he reminds me of a friend that I used to have and a person you used to know named Bartholomew. Bartholomew seemingly has contrarian opinions for the sake of having contrarian opinions that don't really hold any weight. You quoted this before we watched the movie, and I didn't even think anything of it, obviously because I didn't have any context. The refusal to watch or read or partake in fiction for the sake of it not actually happening very much has the same energy of, yeah, I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. Well, what about these 5 movies that you like? I don't watch movies.
I prefer the literary criticism. That way you get the movie, or I'm sorry, the novel, and you also get the critic's views, when he's totally missing the point, not realizing that you're only getting the critic's review, like the critic's view, and you're getting a distorted version of what you're supposed to be fucking reading yourself.
It's a very childish perspective, and out of all of them being like really kind of ignorant children, I find him to be the most frustrating to watch, because he's the kind of person that an English teacher would look at them and be like, no, you're a really smart kid, but...
Yeah, it's one of those things where all of these kids are intellectual. They have like knowledge about things. They've read.
The ability, in the words of Qui-Gon Jinn,
the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
Exactly.
I think these kids read a lot, but I don't think they're absorbing the information the way it's meant to be absorbed, and I don't think they have any of the life experience, not just from being kids, but from being such sheltered children, to actually justify or prove anything that they're talking about to be a reality.
They're sheltered away from like the real world. And on top of that, the thing that is kind of sheltering them is actively decaying.
Yes.
And it's more just like that guy in the bar kind of explained, some people manage to, they manage to make it in the real world.
Yeah.
We're in the 80s now. We're entering the world of Reaganomics, where everyone supposedly thought everything was going to trickle down. And they're realizing that things are not trickling down. And it's the people that are the most aggressive and shitty about capitalism
That's
that are
what,
going
that
to...
didn't start in the 80s. It just became really obvious because America just likes to scream everything loud and stupid.
It's just they're realizing, oh, it might be our turn next, that things turn for us. We might be destined for failure, and that's why I like that scene with the guy in the bar. It's like, you're not destined for it. It's just, the way things are going to turn out is probably just going to be very mediocre for you. It's just going to...
If you're a good person, you will not fucking survive within this system. I think it's specifically really funny that you chose this movie right as I started my reread of The Invisibles.
Okay.
Because these are such thematically, diametrically opposed pieces of, like...
Please go into
art.
it. Please go into it. I want to...
Invisibles is counterculture. Invisibles is a piece of art, because I don't want to spoil it too much. It's also very difficult to spoil it. Invisibles is ostensibly a book that was designed from, like, say, someone like my parents' perspectives to indoctrinate me, which it did.
Yeah.
Not saying that in a bad way, but the Invisibles is all about teaching anarchism as a practical philosophy, while simultaneously, you know, talking to these kids who already have probably like a rebellious streak to them and telling them like this is sort of the direction you should probably be pointing yourself in if you want to practically apply that. And then also it's insane, weird Grant Morrison drug trip shit.
When I started doing The Invisibles, which is a comic book for people who haven't seen the thing, it's a comic book which is kind of my attempt to explain what happened to me after I'd been abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994. And the only reason I was abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994 is because I went to Kathmandu in 1994 to be abducted by aliens. And it works!
For me, when I watch this, it's like, this is very... It's both acting as practical advice for people in the exact opposite situation. You know, it's like you have Dane, who's the main character in The Invisibles, who is a kid who is of privilege purely in the sense of he has a bed to sleep in, and he has food fed to him. So him acting out in rebellion is purely an act of, I don't know, defiance. He reads shit in school about these old acts of rebellion, especially within the UK at that point. That's just something that you are aware of, especially against like the monarchy. But he's not doing it for like practical reasons. He's doing it because he's a kid and he's a pyromaniac and he enjoys to watch things explode. Grant Morrison, I've explained to you, his biggest fear in life is the A-bomb. And he said, I fucking love watching schools and buildings and fire explode, burst into a ball of flames. I wish I had a fucking A-bomb, eh? It's a child, like, saying this. So it's like, to me, thematically, what's so, like, I guess, like, opposing about this as a piece of art is it's talking to these people, trying to tell them within this system, you'll probably be okay. But it's almost antiquated.
Yeah.
In that, and it's dated in that like facet. And I'm not even criticizing this for being, you know, antiquated or dated, because like you have something like this, it has a similar vibe to it. Maybe, I guess, in sort of something like Megalopolis, where Megalopolis is written by a boomer about this boomer utopian ideal, this idea of futurism, which within our systematic oppression that America has created for itself in capitalism, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And the ideal that you're striving towards doesn't exist. So this is like comfort for yuppies, possibly. And I guess what prevents it from being like this really great movie or this really great statement is how, like, I guess detached I feel from that. You and I grew up fine.
Yeah.
We were never.
I think the intention is obviously like, they will mask all of their problems as teenage kids in intellectualism, in stuff that they've read from school, and their general ideas they maybe get passed down from them by, or passed down to them by like their parents and by teachers and so on and so forth. But in reality, it's the same exact problems like every teenager goes through.
Yeah.
The realization that soon enough you're gonna have to be part of the real world and you have no fucking idea how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Because actually there's very little social snobbery in the United States. I mean, it's considered unacceptable. There's almost a national taboo against it. It's looked down upon.
That's good, isn't it?
Oh, I'm not talking about what's good or bad. I'm just making an observation of fact.
Ironically, it's kind of the fact that this movie is about the end of an era that makes it the most positive, right? Yeah. The fact that everything kind of has to come to an end, and that's where the real world sort of begins for these characters. Like, it's the end of the like political social hierarchy in the urban hot bourgeoisie as they describe. You know, they have made this, they've made up like all these acronyms and all these like, you know, distinctions for like, it's kind of like coming up with the granular version of rules for a game that nobody is fucking playing anymore.
It's a justification for their own existence. They don't want to be classified as anything derogatory that anyone below them would classify them as. So they have to think of different terms. You know, there's that entire scene where Charlie's talking to this group of girls after one of the fucking debutante balls, and they're all just speaking about like, listen, America is kind of the one country that doesn't allow snobbery. It's like just completely lacking any kind of self-awareness while also being the most insecure thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to be considered snobby.
I can't handle snobbery, and then immediately snobbery fucking enters the building.
Sorry to be so late.
Where were you?
Didn't Fred tell you?
Tell us what?
You were talking about movies that are ends of an era. Most coming-of-age movies, I guess, inexplicably are about ends of an era.
Yeah,
You know,
because
Saturday Night Fever is about the same thing that this movie's about.
Yeah, for you to come of age, something else has to end.
Yeah, it's like, yes, thematically, the whole like Rat Pack thing is being used as like a background piece.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, Rat Pack. It's gentrified Rat Pack.
Yeah,
is
it's
what
just
this
down to
is.
the rats.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Shut the fuck up. God.
The whole Rat Pack thing seems to have disintegrated.
Rat Pack is down to the rats.
You're not rats. You are fucking gigantic guinea pigs. Shut the fuck up. You are cared for animals.
Yeah, no, and this is a coming of age story, which means necessarily it is like an end of childhood, right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of have to move on from all these things that you're holding on to as as a kid, and you have to choose like what things are you going to want to bring with you. I think it's really it's mirrored by Tom's night desk, like the end table.
Yeah, stuff kind of like changing as like every different like phase of his life.
Yeah, he collects little things and trinkets. Yeah. He gets a Jane Austen book because he wants to impress Audrey. He has that one photo of his past love. He gets the little toy Derringer that he picked up from that garbage pail.
Yeah.
It's very quick. A lot of these shots are like, just real quick, a lot of these shots where they focus on something, I think they could have been like a little longer.
Well no, I mean, and that's, I guess, kind of where it might.
There's lots of things like that. Like, Audrey is out shopping and she sees the entire collection of Jane Austen's books as just this, as a package in a window. Like, so it's meant to be kind of like an impulse buy sort of thing. It's like her whole identity, like in Jane Austen and her books, is just packaged up and like sold, is meant to just catch people's attention, like, and just buy this shit real quick. It's it's just boiling down everything that she loves into like this meaningless capitalist thing, and they just give it like and it's gone. I wish they'd dragged that out a little.
I don't know if this movie is like a first-time editor who ever worked on this before, but
most likely. I didn't check specifically, but it's all
I'll look it up. Put it right on Tony's big fat fucking head.
Tony was wrong.
It feels a lot like a first-time editor, and sort of like that combining with a first-time like feature film director. There are certain moments, and one in particular that kind of sticks out to me as like, the movie doesn't really have much style to it, and that's fine. You know, I'm not really blown away by the filmmaking, and not in the sense of like, you know, oh, they're a first-time filmmaker. It's just kind of average. It's not noticeable. This is why I guess I call it a cable movie. But like with that, I feel like one thing where it tries to do something experimental that I feel like, because the rest of the film has been shot in such a standard facet, that just stands out like a sore thumb and I think doesn't work. I don't like that dream sequence.
I hate him.
From a filmmaking perspective, with the rest of the like the language that the movie had been like going with so far, it just doesn't.
It's weird.
Fit.
Yeah, it's weird to dip surrealist that late and that suddenly.
Especially for a movie that has characters constantly shitting on surrealism, which I would say was intentional. But you telling me that the director himself grew up as a preppy, I don't think so.
It's like And the way that it's filmed, it kind of just feels like, you know, like low budget old films. They didn't like.
They just did a wide shot in front of a black background, which I'm familiar with doing that. They did a wide in front of a back background and just put gels over their lights.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's air quotes surreal when no, it's a flatly framed shot.
Yeah, just like the rest of the film basically. They have like. And yeah, no, it is one of those things where it's a first-time director problem, definitely. He's very open about how he had to learn most of the shit by blowing the first part of his budget.
Yeah, but it's like first time director, but also just it's a if it is a first time editor or like however inexperienced this editor is, the editor themselves is just kind of bad. The way they transition out of scenes, they do a fade out, but it's like middle of the sentence.
That way you get both the novelist's idea as well as the critic's thinking. With fiction, I can never forget that none of it ever really happened, that it's all just made up by the author.
As you said, they need to let that sit, but in my personal experience with stuff where it's like you can't shoot anymore, in their case for money, a lot of times it's time, but time is money, you end up having these situations to where like, I need this shot to linger out for a few seconds, but they decided before I said cut to move, so it would look really awkward. And I can't extend this anymore, so I'm going to end this here. But the flow is just so fucking off. It's like that Jane Austen thing, but every time they would be talking about something, like specifically Tom and Audrey, which once again I guess kind of feeds into like what I thought the movie was kind of going to be about, which it didn't really end up being, which is kind of like this idea of really shallow conversations taking place in big group conversations. I guess it's a part of the movie. And kind of the only important conversations between people taking place in these small, intimate times, like away from the group. But even then, the stuff that they begin to discuss that is more intimate and small scale is still meaningless and stupid. Like, they're getting to know each other, but that's where the whole line about talking about, like, I don't read fiction comes from, are one of those intimate conversations. And how you could then decide, I'm going to devote the next couple of weeks to this person after he tells you that shit.
It's just like... it's also, finally, this is like the end of a friend group, obviously. It's the inevitable that, you know, the break is over and now we have to go back to our individual lives and we're all gonna like break apart as friends and probably never see each other again.
Yeah, and our main character, I don't think it helps that he shows up right towards the end.
Yeah, they start hitchhiking back home, and it seems like that whole stupid journey out of New York where they made error after error after error all in one day is kind of like necessary for the salvaging of what's left of this rat pack and forming like an actual friend group. I like to think that the three, you know, kept in contact after everything, and that's kind of like what the freeze frame towards the end was about.
But the film itself told you that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, you hope so, but you know, you hope that maybe in this like big trial of, you know, in this big like cacophony of failures that it brought people together, maybe there's something there. So I suppose before we get into any last like things that you might want to bring up, what do you think of the music? By the way, Tony's music hour, put it up right here. Cool things.
It's time. I know you've all been waiting for it.
They haven't.
I know Kitten's definitely been waiting for it.
You don't.
It's Tony's music hour, baby.
What did you think of the music, real quick? How do you feel about it? Did you like it? Was it okay?
It was there.
It was there?
I mean, I made a joke about the composer before I started this. It wasn't something that particularly stood out to me besides you doing your usual thing of the opening credits.
They had two composers for this. One of them, put their name right up here. The second composer, whenever you hear like one of these strange out of time songs that feels like it kind of sounds like something weird in like 1970s, 80s, like whatever, it's a guy called Tom Judson. He's probably like one of the most interesting people in Stillman's life at this point, as far as I can tell from like an outsider's perspective. He acted and composed for like off-Broadway plays like Vampire Lesbians of Sodom, right? He had like, he had an ear for the eclectic and the strange, and he had like a decent back catalog of tunes to pull from, which is what a lot of these are. A lot of these tracks are just like things that he made for musicals that just never happened. Okay. It's really interesting. He composed for Metropolitan. He composed for a bit. Did some more like off-Broadway shows. Won awards for his acting in gay pornography, and then went on to do like on Broadway showings of 42nd Street and then Cabaret for some reason.
Cabaret, that makes sense. If you're
You're like, that tracks.
No, that tracks. But like, other than that, I guess kind of just closing thoughts. It's not exact, but kind of the vibes I was getting off this case, and then after the movie, I guess are kind of confirmed. Wes Anderson hadn't directed anything yet, but like. Even something like Bottle Rocket, his first movie, right?
Okay.
Has a recognizable bit of his style. This feels like a college student's attempt at a Wes Anderson movie. If they didn't have the context of like generically people being like, Wes Anderson movies are center framed. And that's all. They're center framed and people act dumb. Look at my AI Wes Anderson thing. I mean, this has like, I guess kind of like a Wes Anderson feel in the sense that it's about a bunch of white people talking about their personal problems. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for most of them. I don't know. Not to like say this is identical to Royal Tenenbaums, but Royal Tenenbaums has a very similar thing. But
Royal Tenenbaums is the 5-star version of this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think you very much agree with that because
doesn't fucking take away from this movie at all. It totally deserves to exist on its own fucking merits. And as a first attempt from somebody who's never fucking taken any serious fucking look at like directing and whatever in his fucking late 30s. That's great. It's an accomplishment. And I love to see one of those fucking things.
Yeah.
But it is no Royal Tenenbaums.
No.
But it's good. It's good. It's worth a try.
On sort of like your thematic thing that you say you want to explore this year, I do think it's interesting that you exclusively brought up the Rat Packs, or like sort of the Rat Pack debutante end of an era thing, because that's going on in the background. But like I said, I think the real thing in this, that the era it's really exploring, is that whole coming of age idea.
Yeah.
Of just, it's less so that the debutante is ending, and more so if this were any other movie, whatever thing throughout their teenage years that was sort of filling their day-to-day is ending, and it's just
whatever genre of music, whatever place you're going to. Thanks for coming with me, and thanks to everybody out there for coming with us too. Hope you got the chance to watch the movie. Hope you liked it. Hope you all had a fun time hating these fucking jackass of people, right? I hope you all had a good time, and I hope to see you guys again next month. I hope to see you again.
April Fools.
Jerk. Gets Jode.
It's not even April next month.
It'll be my month. April!